Okay, welcome Australian Veteran News viewers. Today I'm very lucky to be speaking to Kevin Humphreys. Kevin is the founder of a very important organisation called Operation Cor Infinitus. Kevin's an ex-army officer, a rescue helicopter pilot, and now a mental health ambassador. And Cor Infinitus is a charity and a movement, Kevin, that you've created to help celebrate and respect the memories of veterans who've lost their lives due to the hidden effects of mental health and their battles with mental health following service. Is that right? Yeah,
essentially that's it, Mark. So Cor Infinitus, or for those who know Latin, apparently it's meant to be pronounced Cor Infinitus, but I'll go with the Australian language, which is probably Cor Infinitus. It's a pretty new thing. It's only been around 5-6 months. Matter of fact, it was the day after Anzac Day that I decided to create it, and it was all about offering dignity and respect to those that have served our nation through the profession of arms and taken their lives. But actually, more importantly than that, it's to offer that same dignity and respect to their families, the families that are left behind. I was in Townsville for work, flying the rescue helicopter over Anzac Day, and I was going through the Anzac Park cenotaph and whatnot, and reflecting on a mate of mine who I flew with in Afghanistan, who took his life just prior to Christmas. And I came across a A5 sized funeral service booklet on the ground for a young private, a 34-year-old private soldier who had taken his life on the Anzac Day the year before, held down with a few rocks. And I looked around and I thought, this is just terrible. We've got to do better than this. We have to do better than this for the families. And so I looked around and I thought, I'm going to get a memorial put in over there. And as I started talking to people about it, I honestly just got swamped with support. It was fantastic. And so we've got the first one in to Townsville, unveiled on the 10th of September, a month ago, on World Suicide Prevention Day. And the aim is now to make it a truly national initiative and put one in every city and town around the country.
Well, let's start a sort of sub-movement to get the pronunciation correct. So, Cor Infinitus, you have to help me.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, Cor Infinitus.
Infinitus, thank you.
The proper Latin pronunciation, but yeah. I reckon it's going to get better following Cor Infinitus in Australia.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's see how we go. I'll wrap my tongue around it. I've just been calling Cor Infinitus for such a long time since we first spoke, and
that's what everyone calls it. So
I've fallen into the habit. So my apologies about that. Look, it's an important initiative that from very humble beginnings, I suppose, from an observation you made, quite one of those quieter moments. So I mean, what was it about that leaflet that was under those rocks that really sort of grabbed you into sort of really thinking deeply about it and deciding to do something much more substantial than just reflecting on it?
Yeah, as I said, a fellow that I flew with in Afghanistan, he was in my squadron, named Steve Faisal. He was a Army aviation captain. He took his life just before Christmas. But I was almost one of the statistics. Going back to 2008, my Army days, I had a number of operational deployments, and it wasn't the rockets or the bullets, the cliff edges that brought me undone. It was actually a toxic command environment for me that brought me undone. But I almost took my life in the first half of 2008. I had 9 months off work and got myself back to being functional again. I was very fortunate to get back flying again. And got on with my life, but I was deeply ashamed and felt like a failure for having contemplated suicide, having a breakdown, 9 months off work, all that kind of stuff, and I felt I'd brought real shame on my family and indeed the country. I thought I'd failed my country. That's how deep my level of shame was, and so I finally, after 7 years or so, started talking about it, and now I am a mental health advocate. But it just really hit me. This guy was 34, Private Bradley Carr was his name, and I was 35 when I almost took my life. And so it was that connection in that moment that made me go, we need to do better for his family and for every other family that's out there. And the thing that I'd say to people as well about Cor Infinitus, which actually means infinite courage, because I believe that's what the family have needed up until the point that the member takes their life, and then they absolutely need infinite courage every day moving forward, and they really need to share rather than hide their pain. Cor is actually Latin for heart, and that's the root word for courage. And the families need to share their pain, not hide it. And so, yeah, it was a combination of all those things that really brought it about and made me feel strongly enough to make it happen.
I think it seems to me, Kevin, that there's a bit of a fear of, if we start shining a light into the issues around veteran suicide, and you'd be aware of the call for Royal Commission in veteran suicides and the various views about whether that should go ahead or whether that should be supported or not. But one of the base fears that I guess I'd like to address with you is the idea that if you shine a light into that, you can sort of amplify the pain or the grief. Do you think that's right?
I believe it's a matter and a measure of how it's done. So Cor Infinitus is actually equally a suicide prevention initiative as well as a dignity and respect initiative for the families. It is not about glorifying the person's final act. It is absolutely not. It's about dignity and respect. As far as talking about it and whether that perpetuates or otherwise, I believe very firmly that talking about suicide, talking about mental illness, and quite often mental health and mental illness are used interchangeably. We all have mental health. That's a state of well-being that can fluctuate. But mental illness is something that obviously has that real stigma with it. If we talk about mental illness and we talk about suicide with a very clear purpose and objective to educate, make aware, break down stigma, and eliminate, then we're going to do good. If we talk about mental illness and stigma just for the sake of it, and we reiterate the negatives of it all, then we're not going to do good.
And we must do a lot more to understand it too. I'm not really sure that we have all the information about what are the precursors, what are the triggers for these tragedies, and I think that's one of the big concerns, that it's much more complicated than I think the general community might sort of think it could be. It could be that, as you said for yourself and your own experience, personal experience, it wasn't the rockets and the other dangers. It was something that was, outside of that realm, and it had a profound impact on you, and those sorts of things potentially have an impact on many other people as well. And it's quite unique to a service environment and potentially other environments such as emergency services and things like that too. So there's probably a few parallels there.
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, arguably what ended up causing me to fall in a heap, you'll find in any workplace, ultimately. So it's not necessarily unique. And the other thing is that I say about mental illness, as I think we all know, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter what your age, your race, your income level, your sexuality, or anything. It just doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care. So we need to be very much aware of that, and therefore, what I say is, as long as you've got a brain and a blood supply, you're susceptible to mental illness, and therefore can impact any of us at any stage. And it's equally unique. There are certain characteristics and traits that and a mental illness is a diagnosable criteria. So there are certain criteria that are common for those types of mental illnesses, but a lot of the symptoms associated with it for individuals can be very unique.
So there's many shades of grey, I suppose, in terms of it's not just as you go. If you've ever dealt with DVA, there's a lot of forms to flick and tick, and that's all very, very well defined and stipulated what category people fall into.
That's right, and that's exactly right, and that's one of the unique things about Cor Infinitus, and one of the things I've been very particular about is that Cor Infinitus does not represent any individual era, any person, any branch of service, any rank, any circumstance. it covers all those who have served our nation since we started,
Right.
and have taken their lives. And therefore it's completely inclusive, but it's completely anonymous, and it's owned by all the families.
So how does it work?
Yep. So what we have is the initiative, and we're still standing up the initiative. It's all happened very quickly.
Right.
So we're still in the process of standing up the initiative. And I've got a strategy meeting this afternoon after this,
right.
To look at how we really do branch this out nationally. We've had already got commitments from the federal government, as well as various district RSLs, state government here in Queensland at a regional level, as well as a number of other local areas, South Australia, Victoria, actually 2 from Victoria now come in to look at, hey, I want one of these in my neighbourhood. So I'm approaching whoever I can approach.
So to say, when you said one of these, what do you mean by one of those?
So a memorial. Matter of fact, I'll send you a couple of photos, and you can put underneath.
I'll insert them into the video or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a modest memorial that is appropriate for the surroundings that it's going in. Townsville, for example, they've got the main cenotaph, and then on the 4 quadrants, there are a series of small plinths. They're only about 40 centimetres high, 25 centimetres square. And so brass plaque on top of that, that fits in with all the other plaques around it, all the other casualties of war, all the other service organisations wanting to remember their people. And that's the right place to put it.
Yeah.
And so, but Townsville's cenotaph and quadrant plinths is different to what's in Darwin, Sydney, Samford, Whyalla and everywhere else. So a memorial of whatever shape and form is appropriate to fit in with the local area, but the symbology, the wording is consistent. So I had a lot of feedback. We went out to families of people who have lost loved ones and got their feedback for what type of wording and symbology is important to you. And it was very clear the type of wording and symbology that was wanted, and that is the Cor Infinitus symbol, which is something I created. It's originally a watercolor symbol. It's soft and caring and compassionate. It's an infinity loop, which is gold, because the value, the individual is and was, but importantly still is valued. But that infinity loop is torn and frayed, representing the internal turmoil. And then there's a sprig of rosemary woven through the centre, showing that the military is still with them. And basically to the families says, you're not forgotten. We're still here with you. So, yeah, so that symbology, and then the wording that dedicated to all those who served our nation and were overwhelmed by the battle within, lest we forget.
So how have the families responded that have you got any anecdotes or any experiences that you could share about the sort of response that you've had from the families? Yeah.
Again, the response from the families, both locally in Townsville, as well as other responses direct and secondhand from those in Sydney, Victoria, South Australia and others, has been 100% positive, overwhelming response to say, thank you. Finally, someone has thought about us. And please, please, please continue to put these all around the nation. So, yeah, that's what I intend to do.
Okay. And so you've got Townsville. What other places are the plaques displayed?
Yeah, so Townsville's the first location. And my intention from here is to create what I'm calling a symbolic Cor Infinitus cataphag party. So I want to create one north, south, east and west, Darwin, Tasmania, Perth and Brisbane, so that they can stand guard for the nation whilst I then fill in the map and go from there. So, yeah, so I'm in discussions at the moment with here in Brisbane, a local area in Brisbane at Samford, and in discussion in Darwin. But yeah, I haven't yet started on Perth and Tassie, but certainly a couple of other local conversations have started with other places around the country.
So there's a lot of, Kevin, a lot of careful, symbolic sort of approach to this, isn't there? The way you're approaching this, you've really thought quite carefully about it. Who else is supporting you with these decisions? You mentioned you've got a strategy meeting and things like that. Who else is supporting you and part of your, putting this together and making it work?
Yeah, a number of people, some of which I'll name, some I won't. But a really important part of this, which I got educated on along the way, is the need for messaging of hope and help. So that when someone goes and sees this memorial, if they are feeling vulnerable themselves, then immediately there's phone numbers, websites, whatnot to help, 000 Lifeline, Kids Helpline, etc. Excuse me. But also there's messaging there of hope. And what I've done is I actually approached a number of families that I know or came in contact with, and asked them if they would provide me messaging to help if someone was vulnerable and standing there and they read this, to help them step back from the brink and seek help and seek life. And the 5 family members that I've got is from a parent of someone who's gone, a partner, a child, a mate, and then also someone who attempted to take their life but lived. And the messages from those 5 people are quite short, but they are very powerful, and particularly when they're all put together. And we needed to make sure that those messages were appropriate. They were impactful, but they were still safe, as psychologically safe as we could make them. Because some terminology is quite poor to put out there, and there's other better ways of saying things. And so, what I'm getting to is to answer your question. That is to say that I've had fantastic support from Open Arms, Mates for Mates, and also the North Queensland Primary Health Network to provide clinical oversight and clinical governance for the wording on the plaque, as well as for all the messages of hope that will go with it. So that it's not just Kev's good ideas. There is a layered approach of oversight, particularly clinical oversight.
And I've gathered, Kevin, from our conversation today and earlier conversations we've had, that you are very concerned about the possibility of any kind of unintended consequences of putting a certain type of message out there, and that's very important to have that clinical oversight, and I commend you for that. I think that's a really clever thing to do and a very important thing to do. So what do you need to continue this project in terms of to complete the work, to finish your north, south, east, west, and then fill in the gaps in between? Are you getting support for that, or are you raising money? What's the approach?
Yeah, so I'll be raising money. That's part of the strategy meeting this afternoon, to look at how best to do this. And effectively what I need is either end of the spectrum. One is the funding for putting the memorials in. For example, the plinth 40 centimetres high, 25 centimetres wide, and a brass plaque on top. In Townsville cost about $3 grand. So not that much, but still enough, but particularly when we start multiplying that around the country. And I'd like to thank the North Queensland RSL, District RSL, for funding that completely. They put up all the costs, which was magic. And Townsville City Council could not have been more supportive.
Fantastic.
Which was great. And so funding is absolutely a key. And if I can keep getting funding through local area donors and sponsors, that's great. If I can get bigger grant funding to put it together that way, then that's great as well. Either one works. And again, actually, Mr. Philip Thompson, the federal MP in Townsville, talking with him about a couple of things about how to do this has also been marvellous. And then the other thing I'm going to need around the place, because there's only one Kev Humphreys, is local champions. Local champions to be able to be my eyes, ears and mouth on the ground. And that's what I had in Townsville with 2 fellas, Mr. Paul Willis and Mr. Wayne Preedy. So they were my eyes, ears and mouth. They were my doers, my fixers.
Because you're in Brisbane, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. So a local champion who can be that continual point of contact on the ground with the RSL, with the council, with the community and whatnot, to make sure that things keep happening in Whyalla whilst it's happening in Wollongong, whilst it's happening in Wagga Wagga, whilst it's happening in wherever else.
So if anybody is watching this and they want to be involved in some way, they could possibly just contact us through our website, or go directly to yours and drop a note, and potentially you can vet them through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, I haven't got the website up and running yet. That's another
Well,
thing.
they can
Got to
send a
get on.
note through the
Yeah,
contact page at AVN, and we'd be
yeah,
very happy to forward on the information.
yeah. That'd be magic. We have got a Facebook group that we set up. So it's just Cor Infinitus is the group on
Yeah.
Facebook, and yeah, so it's a group rather than a page.
Mm.
And also my email is assistance@corinfinitus.org. But yeah, whether they go through your page or email that assistance email address, that'd be great.
Mm. So one of the things that we're learning is that, or we probably should know quite well by now, that suicide prevention is an incredibly complicated undertaking, and it's incredibly important as well. You know, what are the barriers, do you think, and particularly that relate to military service, that prevent veterans from taking steps to seek help? There just seems, in my mind, I see barriers there that, you know, there's invisible barriers that just stop people taking that step, whether it's a stigma or, you know, you mentioned feelings of shame and things like that. I mean, what are the things we need to do to sort of take that away?
You know, unfortunately, I don't have the answer yet, and to be honest, I don't think anybody does, because it is such a dynamic, complex beast. Education is absolutely the first thing, and that's where talking about it with a purpose, not just for the sake of it.
So we do need to be more open about it.
We've got to be more open about it, absolutely. And I believe in reflecting on my own experience, I came across a little theory of mine around shame and maybe why it's so bad for military people in particular, but also anybody that really connects their identity with their rank or role or uniform, in whatever that may be. And that is around the issue of paradox, which I was always a very black or white thinker. And anyway, now I'm a very black and white thinker. They're both there the whole time. The yin and yang symbol is an example of that, masculine and feminine, to make the whole. The opposite of pride is shame. And I think the military in particular self-selects proud people. And from the moment you get off the bus at Kapuka, at Duntroon, at whichever training centre you go to for your service, it gets smashed into you. Be proud of your country, be proud of yourself, be proud of your company, your units, your mates, your this, your that, your whatever. And so it continues all the way through your service, and for good reason, I'll add. Right?
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, the worst thing you can ever do as a military member is go jack on your mates. And that is also drummed into you. And so if paradox is true, in that you have two seemingly opposite things coexist at the same time, then as your level of pride goes up and up and up and up and up, so too does your potential for shame go up and up and up. And when you can't do your military thing anymore, when you're perceived as going jack on your mates, when you have a breakdown, when whatever it is, then all of this pride that you once had in your uniform, which also created a lot of your identity, when that all disappears, then this perceived shame becomes real shame for the individual. And you know, I had the phone number for a unit doctor, unit psychologist in my phone, as well as some really good mates. And all the way up until the end, where I almost did it, I still couldn't bring myself to ring them, because I was ashamed of it and embarrassed. And I'd rather die. And I do believe it's because of such a high level of pride. Well, I believe one of the reasons is such a high level of pride and the shame that we then associate with it. And when we feel that that's all that's left, we've just done the worst thing we could possibly do in our military minds, gone jack on our mates. And yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why.
So there's sort of be some narrative about, you know, individual courage as well, I suppose, because there is that strong theme in military service about being part of the team and doing all those sorts of things. And your identity is built up as you move through, you know, as you get promoted and you stay on and you become an important team member. But then at the same time, you're living by this fairly, you know, important sort of code of conduct, if you like. And then what happens when you get let down through, say, workplace bullying or something like that? And you've got there is another paradox there, isn't there? Because
Absolutely.
you experience something very negative that you just, it's very difficult to understand how that could possibly happen.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was 34, 35 years old, and I was just going, this can't be real. I'm a 35-year-old adult. Surely not. Like, and then I start thinking, it's me. Which doesn't help at all.
So it's extremely important for people to seek assistance, but there are clearly barriers for them to do so. So I suppose it sort of then there's an opportunity sometimes if you pick up the signs, and not everybody does. I know it just doesn't work that way.
That's right.
But what's your advice to anybody who's concerned about themselves, concerned about a family member or a friend, or a teammate, etc.? What would you suggest?
So early intervention for yourself or for someone else is always better than later intervention. That's absolutely key, because far easier to keep yourself healthy whilst you're healthy than get ill and then try to get healthy again. So absolutely early intervention is key. And then from there, it really is around education and discussion. Don't be ashamed of having a conversation. Don't be ashamed of putting your hand out to offer help to somebody. I believe another part of our problem is that there's shame and stigma on the one hand and tall poppy syndrome on the other.
Right.
For people who want to offer help, they don't want to be seen as the goody two shoes and this kind of stuff all the time. So I think that's another element in Australian culture that we need to address as well around this. But yes, don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. And indeed, just about every survey that comes out now, Beyond Blue did one for emergency services 2 years ago, and they found that the three findings, one in particular was that self-stigma was alive and well, but pretty much every single person was compassionate towards a work colleague who was found to be suffering some kind of mental health issue or problem. So if we can be compassionate to someone else, folks, we need to be able to be compassionate to ourselves and realise that it's not just them, it's all of us. If we've got a brain and a blood supply, we're susceptible to mental illness. That's just it. So have the courage to talk about it, to share what's going on. There are so many avenues of help, almost too many these days because it can get confusing. But your GP is a universal first port of call, because they can then give you the Medicare plan to go and be able to talk to someone. But there's also so many free online resources as well.
But even just soliciting the support of a family member or a mate to just encourage you along to that next step is probably
that's
just as important. I suppose people shouldn't, even if they're just feeling slightly, we talk about illness all the time, but if people just don't feel good emotionally, then it's not a good way to be for a long period of time, and you ought to speak to somebody about that and do something about it if you can.
That's exactly right. And some of your best mates will be best mates to play soccer with, to go and have a beer with, to go and play golf with, or go and get your nails done, whatever. But they won't necessarily be the right mate to talk about this stuff. So if at first you don't succeed, try again with someone different. And so it's the same message for your mates when you want to talk about this, because some people just don't get it. And it's exactly the same when it comes to professional help as well. Psychologists are people too, and sometimes you just don't gel with them. So if the first one doesn't work out, don't stop. Go and try someone else.
All right. Well, Kevin Humphreys, thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciated that opportunity to speak with you, and we'll include some obviously some numbers for some helplines at the end of this. But I do encourage with you that people to take steps to feel better if they're not feeling good, and to reach out to friends or loved ones if they're concerned. It's a very important thing to do if you've got the opportunity to do it. So thank you very much again, and we'll certainly share some details about the project as well, so people can get involved if they'd like to.
Magic. Thanks, Mark, for the time. I really appreciate it. Cheers.
Good on you, mate. Thank you.